More than 60 years ago, the most important battle in the history of the world ground to a halt here. The D-Day landings were a huge gamble and very nearly a disaster. This is the Plage d'Or in Normandy, but since the events of June the 6th, 1944, it's been known only by its codename, Omaha Beach. It's where the bloodiest of the fighting happened and where it all went wrong. But historians on both sides of the Atlantic are still arguing about the reasons why.
And this is an ammunition tunnel, and that would be stacked high with shelving full of ammunition.
The casualty count on Omaha Beach, in retrospect, was much, much higher than historians had previously thought.
Every one of these black dots is a dead American soldier.
Stories of the heroism of the US soldiers who landed here have been told and retold in Hollywood films like Saving Private Ryan. But what really happened here? What was it like for the men who had to fight their way ashore? And how did they manage to win?
The machine gun fire was going across the water.
Yeah, I got hit twice with machine guns in the arm, and it just about tore my arm off.
Yeah, there were a lot of dead bodies. There was no radio communication. None at all. Absolutely none.
This is a film about training for Mission Impossible and what happens when that mission goes wrong. It's the full, true story of Bloody Omaha. When the Allied soldiers landed on these Normandy beaches, it was the first step on the road to capture Berlin and the beginning of the end of the Second World War. But on one of the 5 invasion beaches, it very nearly ended before it ever began, because here, on Omaha Beach, the American troops were slaughtered as they came ashore. The amazing thing is that 63 years later, historians and military experts are still trying to figure out why so many more men died here on this beach than on any of the others. After America joined the Second World War, the Allies agreed that victory over the Nazis would require a massive invasion of German-occupied France. Initial planning for D-Day actually began in March 1943. Codenamed Operation Overlord, it was to be a joint British, American and Canadian mission and the biggest amphibious invasion ever attempted. On November the 28th, Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill met in Tehran and decided that Overlord must be their main priority for 1944. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander and General Bernard Montgomery Commander of Land Forces. The D-Day invasion would be based on surprise and on devastating firepower, and much of that firepower would come from across the Atlantic. In North America, almost 2 million American and Canadian troops were assembled, although no one was told exactly where they were going. Among them was 19-year-old Private First Class Ray Tollefson.
We were obviously going to Europe. We got to the port, and there we see the Queen Elizabeth, which once again told us we had to be going to the British Isles. And we docked at Liverpool, and all the workmen, the guys on the dock were yelling for cigarette yanks. And the guy got gum chum and all that. And so we were throwing them cigarettes. And then we boarded a train and we went on to Bude in Cornwall. And in Cornwall, they told us we were going to be billeted in private homes. And I was fortunate to end up with the Harry Ward family on, I think it was 21 Killerton Road, and it was a family thing. I was lonesome, you know, so made it real nice.
And it was neat living in town.
pub across the street, bank across the street, fish and chips up the street. It was real neat.
The scale of the D-Day plans was incredible. By April 1944, 2,876,000 troops were encamped in England. By May, the figure was well over 3 million. The whole of the south of England was one huge military training camp. The joint American, British and Canadian mission would be one of the Allies' greatest triumphs. But more than 60 years later, historians are gaining a new understanding into how it might have ended in disaster. Historian Simon True teaches at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst and is also a D-Day expert. He's trying to discover how a potential failure on Omaha Beach was turned into a victory.
The Allied invasion of Normandy was to take place across a broad front, right along the Calvados coastline and at the bottom of the Cotentin Peninsula. It's a total breadth of about 80 kilometres, or about 55 miles altogether.
The plan was an ambitious one. The Allies would land 130,000 men at 5 different assault beaches. The British wanted the element of surprise. The US planners wanted time for an aerial bombardment.
The Normandy invasion is a function of a compromise. The whole thing is a function of compromise. If I gave a military problem to the British, right, not just an amphibious operation, any military problem, if I gave that to the British, they would come up with one solution. Right? If I gave the same problem, the exact same problem, to American military leaders, right, they would come up with a very different solution. Now, let's put them both on the same battlefield and say that, gee, all right, come up with a plan for this. And what you're going to get is a compromise plan.
And this compromise plan would have serious consequences for the soldiers landing on Omaha Beach. The Allies knew that if an invasion of this size was to have a hope of succeeding, everything about it needed to be meticulously planned. And one of the first things they had to do was gather intelligence about the Normandy coastline. In London, the British government asked the BBC to broadcast an appeal to the public to send in any pictures or photographs they had of the French coastline. 30,000 postcards and photos of family holidays in France arrived in the next post. In total, the people of Britain sent in 10 million images, allowing the Allies to build up an incredibly detailed picture of the coastline. The D-Day planners seemed to think of everything. The invading armies would have to bring thousands of tanks and other heavy vehicles with them, so they had to make sure that the sand was hard enough for them to drive over without getting stuck. But how would they find out? The incredible solution was a Royal Navy X-craft. On the 18th of January 1944, a midget submarine crept across the English Channel. Under the cover of darkness, it surfaced just off the Normandy coastline. Major Logan Scott Bowden and Sergeant Bruce Ogden Smith swam ashore and coolly took samples of the beach for analysis back in England. It's a fantastic story. They crept ashore at night, right under the Germans' noses, to check that the sand would take the tanks. Across Britain, the D-Day troops were put into tough training camps to build up physical fitness.
I don't think there wasn't a day where we didn't have a speed march, where we didn't run at least 5-10 miles. That was just like getting out of bed.
The elite US Rangers were sent on extra training for a top-secret mission, with ladders borrowed from the London Fire Brigade.
You knew it would be something in the line of high hills or cliffs or something of that nature there.
We set up training down in the Isle of Wight, where there's some enormous cliffs down there, up at 200 feet in height.
And they drop these rope ladders down, you go scurrying up the cliffs, and then you get up the top of the cliffs, and they had this rope that they'd come down, put around your shoulders and around your leg, and drop you down, and you grab it like this, and it'll stop you. And we did that. We were 19 years old, 20 years old. That was fun.
You're following a crowd. You're just going along whatever you're told to do, and that's the way you're trained. You're not trained to start analyzing and to suggesting you do this or that. You're doing what you're told, and that's what you go.
With so many troops assembled in Britain, the Allies knew their preparations